FOXSOUL Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
Peace and love, I'm Nielle.
On today's report, we are honoring Veterans All Show. First, with a special look at and discussion about the history and legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen.
We discussed the state of Black veterans with retired Chief Warrant Officer of the U.S. Army, Latia Settle, who was also the NAACP Armed Services and Veterans Affairs Committee Chair. And we let you know what businesses are showing love to our veterans.
Soulmates, we have that and so much more. You know why? Because it's our voice and it's our truth. So let's get to it.
Good evening, Soulmates. On this special day, today is Veterans Day, and one of the last living members of the famed Tuskegee Airmen is being honored today at the commemorative Air Force National Air Base in Dallas. His name is Charles McGee, and he is 101 years old. Mr. McGee is also the oldest living member of the all-black military pilot group who fought during World War II as part of the 332nd Fighter Group. McGee flew a total of 409 combat missions in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War, one of the highest by any Air Force fighter pilot in history. He served his country for more than 30 years. The celebration of Mr. McGee's service also marked the official opening of the National Aviation Education Center. Also unveiled was the Brigadier General Charles McGee and Don Hens Theater, which educates the public about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and the women Air Force service pilots.
Joining us now to discuss the rich history of the Tuskegee Airmen is Gabriel Christian, board member of the East Coast Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. Welcome to the Black Report.
Well, first of all, let me just thank you, Ms. Suttle. Thank you so much, Black Report, for having us on. I smiled coming in because you threw us a great surprise. Last year, the reason I'm on this program is because of General McGee. Last year, I was a chaperone in LA when I met Ms. Anderson, who invited me on here today. So it's great to see that General McGee is out and about at 101. Every day when we woke up in Los Angeles, he was up before me. And of course, he's almost twice my age. So I just want to give a shout out to all the veterans. I want to give a shout out in particular to the remaining documented original Tuskegee Airmen, of which General McGee is the oldest and the highest ranking. 15,000 Tuskegee Airmen served during World War II. Of those, almost 1,000 were pilots. And they executed their missions with heroism and by expanding the boundaries of liberty in Europe in the fight against fascism in World War II, they opened the doors of equality of opportunity that makes for programs like the Black Report to be on television. We stand, all of us, on the shoulders of those airmen because what they did was transformative. They transformed the society from which they came. March 1941, this year, it's 80 years since March 1941, when the Tuskegee Experience began, and today we are enjoying the fruits of their sacrifice and of their service.
I am so glad to have you on the show today. I actually met Mr. McGee because you brought him to the LA Sentinel, and just a treasure and jewel to meet. I want to talk to you. I wore my red today in honor. Can you talk to us about the significance of the red coats that you gentlemen wear when you are out and about?
Well, the red tails were the distinguishing insignia or the distinguishing marking on the tailpiece of the P-51 Mustangs that they flew in Europe. In a way, it represents the sacrifice of ages of our community here in the United States, which we know is essential in the making of the nation. After great toil without reward, we went through the Civil War under President Lincoln, or immortal president, and you had the U.S. colored troops, and then you had the Buffalo Soldiers. And in World War I, well, before that, on San Juan Hill, you had the Rough Riders with Teddy Roosevelt, who were Buffalo Soldiers. And in World War I, you had the Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Regiment, which was the most storied regiment in World War I. And in the interwar period, you had the old Jim Crow system that did not recognize the outstanding service of African American military men and women. Not so many women then, but certainly women have always been part of our military, even we're not recognized. And then in 1941, through the work of the NAACP, through the work of the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier and the New Amsterdam News, the Black Church, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and Eleanor Roosevelt, who was a progressive, President Roosevelt's wife, the First Lady, we saw a great momentum that led inexorably to the institution of the program at Tuskegee Army Airfield, Moulton Field, so to speak, part of the storied Tuskegee Institute founded by Booker T. Washington, where they were trained in Alabama. And then, of course, the first units went out to Europe, and the 332nd was formed. And of course, the first director was Colonel Noel Parrish, a white cavalry officer from Kentucky, but he was an open-minded man.
Right.
He was a fair man. And today we recognize Colonel Parrish, who was white American, as the top award you can get in the Tuskegee Airmen Association is the Noel Parrish Award. And we recognize his leadership. And then, of course, we had Benjamin O. Davis, who took over as the first African-American commandant of the program.
So much history is going to be just known today. We're going to learn so much about veterans and the history today on this show, and so we're very happy to have you. So speaking of history and knowledge, can you let us know, and our soulmates know, what was the Tuskegee Airmen experiment? What was it all about?
So you have to be very careful. We call it the Tuskegee Experience because there was a Tuskegee Experiment, which is a totally different, rather sad episode in our history where African Americans at Tuskegee were used essentially as guinea pigs in a syphilis experiment. That is, of course, not to be confused with the Tuskegee Airmen Experience, where African Americans were trained as fighter pilots, as bombardiers and bomber pilots. The bomber pilot group never did see service. The war ended in Europe before they could go to Europe, and before they could go to the Pacific, of course, the war ended there as well. And I want to say, because I'm being interviewed by two beautiful sisters, and I want to recognize the fact that a great number of the administrative crew and the medical staff were female. So the sisters were there at the tip of the spear. And you know, for the metric, I believe, runs like this. For every one person in the air, there are 10 to 12 on the ground. So there were 15,000 persons who were part of the Tuskegee Experience. That is the U.S. Army Air Corps fighter units and bomber units and ground crew and admin and secretarial and medical staff who served during World War II, that is 1941 through 1945. And of course, later in 1949, President Truman desegregated the U.S. Armed Forces. And I'll have the world know that the first
well, wait, Mr. I want to
section.
You're so passionate, and you know, I just listening to you talk about this and break everything down. And you said something a second ago, Mr. Christian. You said we all stand on the shoulders of the Tuskegee Airmen, and you are absolutely right. And I have to ask you, because I can feel it coming out of you. Why are you personally so passionate about this?
Well, let me just share this. It's an interesting story. Today, this year we celebrate 10 years since our father left us. He was Wendell Mackenzie Christian. He served in the British Army because I was born in a little British colony in the Caribbean. And 7,000 West Indians served in the Royal Air Force in World War in World War II, rather. 7,000. But they served in an integrated Royal Air Force. Whereas in the United States Army Air Corps, the African Americans were in a segregated unit. So there were pilots from my high school who served in the Royal Air Force in England during World War II, but they were in integrated units. In the United States, they were in segregated units. Why is this important? Well, when I was at high school, one of my friends whose mother had been in England and had worked for about 20 years returned, and she gave me a book on World War II. And in that book, I saw a picture for the first time at age 12 of he was not general then, he was Colonel Benjamin O. Davis. I was shocked, because I only thought that Black people flew in the Royal Air Force. I did not know that African Americans had flown. So you must understand, today we know of the Tuskegee Airmen, but in the 1970s, this was the very, very, very little known story. And the East Coast chapter, to which I belong, which is the National Capital Chapter, the foundational chapter started by General Davis and the others, was started in 1973. Really a small group. Today, there are about 50 chapters. Chapter president is 24-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, Jerome Hodge. And our national president is a former member of my chapter and former president of our chapter, Jerry Burton, also a longtime U.S. Army Air Force personnel. So I'm passionate because I can see how the Tuskegee Airmen transformed society for the better and open doors of opportunity so we could become doctors, lawyers, admirals, generals, even president of the United States.
I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I definitely want to ask you, how are the chapters keeping the legacy of the soldiers alive? Can you tell our soulmates that, please?
Very good, very, very good question. So we focus on aerospace and aviation science through a program run by Yvonne McGee, the daughter of General McGee, who you just had on as a lead to this program. Yvonne McGee is a pilot, and she runs our Youth in Aviation program. We give scholarships every year. Because of COVID, we've not had our breakfast, but we keep the legacy alive. And by preparing the young servicemen and women of tomorrow, the young corporate executives of tomorrow, in particular in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We know that those core areas are very important in the science and technology careers of the 21st century. And so we are preparing that generation so they can reach the stars, literally. That's what we're doing to maintain the legacy. And we're very blessed that you've had us on this afternoon, or this evening rather, to promote and to encourage and to secure the support of the wider community, indeed the world, as we continue the work of these noble men and noble women. With those who sacrifice, we would not be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us today, giving us the insight of the Tuskegee Airmen. We know we stand on their shoulders and the service that they provided to our country and to the world. Thank you so much, Mr. Christian, for being here today.
Thank you so much for your service as well, and a warm salute to all the servicemen and women. God bless you all.
God bless.
One of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, 94-year-old Woody Woodhouse, met with students at Mission Grammar School in Roxbury on Wednesday as part of a fundraising effort for a local American Legion charter ahead of Veterans Day, according to Boston.com. School officials invited Woodhouse, who lives near the school, along with local veterans and Mission Grammar graduates, George Rollins and William Mullen, said Emily Jakim, the school's director of advancement and communication. Woodhouse is one of the dozen living Tuskegee Airmen, the military's first Black aviation combat unit. Today being Veterans Day is so powerful, so impactful, and I feel like we should take this day to definitely, of course, watch FOXSOUL's Black Report, but to dig deep and find some more knowledge that you didn't know already about the Tuskegee Airmen, as we talked about in our previous story, as well as how Veterans Day affects many of our Black Americans.
I agree with that. And for this school that he went to, was 90% people of color. So we talk about how this can't be taught in the schools, but if you could see how they embraced him, right? And now it returns to a teaching moment, which I love using that phrase. You guys already know that. So it's powerful that he was able to do that, and they were able to take that in, to take that knowledge, that part of history, so they can know, like, hey, anything is possible. He did it during that time that we were in, and now look where we are now, so I can achieve the same goals.
You know, and what a great message to the kids, you know, especially in the time of today where everything is so polarized. There's you know, an increase in hate crimes. People are telling little black kids, black adults, little black kids, you know, go back to your country. You know, what a message of this is your country too. Yeah. We were a part of every single aspect of the history, the protection, the building, the beginning of this country. What a message. You know what I mean? Something for them to see at such a young age.
Definitely.
I really appreciate how there are men and women across this country that are keeping the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen alive, like the East Coast chapter. There's a West Coast chapter here in Los Angeles. And, you know, for them to, you know, still encourage the living legends of the Tuskegee Airmen like General McGee, who is still traveling. You know, he was here in Los Angeles, I think, year before last. He was in Dallas yesterday. And just to keep our history alive, and he is so sharp as a whip, as well as the other gentleman we just talked about, and preserving our history, the Buffalo Soldiers. There are so many different entities that Black people participated in, even the Civil War. So many soldiers that we have to remember that got us to the freedom that we are today. And just to say their names, say their platoon names, it's just we should remember them, honor them, reflect on them, and continue to do and preserve their history.
Absolutely. All right, well, a group of Democratic U.S. senators announced Wednesday a bill that would stop the deportations of some immigrant veterans. According to Axios, the proposal, similar to a House version, would help prevent deportations of non-citizen veterans, provide pathways to citizenship for some immigrant service members and their families, and allow deported veterans to return home to the U.S. This is amazing news because, you know, some of our soulmates may not know you do not have to be a citizen to join armed forces, but that doesn't guarantee that you can become one. And if you think about that, right, if you're protecting this country, you're fighting for this country, you should have that right. So I think this is very, very powerful, and I'm hoping that they can continue to get this right. And because we know there was a point where we felt like a lot of people were not being able to come into the country or turned away. So this is a positive thing.
I mean, even if you look at Afghanistan, right? It's a prime example of what's happening. There are so many translators. That's a really big part of how, you know, not only how military operations go forward and the way they're supposed to, right? But how our service members stay safe, right? You need translators, you need interpreters. And so many of those people are seen as, you know, you turned your back on your own country when it's not that, but you know, they got a job, they needed a job, they did what they thought was right, what they thought was helpful. And then when it's over, they're stuck and they're trying to, they thought like, hey, I thought you would take care of me. And this is an effort of a group of lawmakers trying to take care of people who put their lives on the line, their futures on the line, their comfort on the line every day to take care of people in our country.
Right.
I just think about how many families are going to be reunited, how many people are going to be able to see a loved one that they once thought this might not happen. So Romeo, I'm with you that this is definitely great news.